Hi guys, Grant J here, and welcome to another one of our deck workshop videos. With Opus 4 recently come out, there's a whole lot of cards and decks to really experiment around with and try out, and today I'd like to show you one of the newest decks that I've built. So, today's deck is the mid-range mono win deck, aka Sow the Seeds. So this deck is all about sort of abusing the new 5-cost forward that Win got, which is Kan-E-Senna, which is a 5-cost forward, 7,000 power, that's got the ability to increase its power, make it unchoosable, and reactivate your backup. So, it's a great card. It's kind of like a more conditional but more powerful Bards, and this combined with Bards gives us a really strong deck to sort of build around. So, let's get started. The general strategy of the deck is to build up to 5 backups quickly, and we have a whole lot of ways to do this by using backups that can search themselves, as well as backups that come in for really cheaply, such as Evoker and Aerith. And then once we do get to that 5 backup mark, we do play our 5 CP forwards, which is Kan-E-Senna and Bards, for effectively free, which allows us to have a whole lot of spare CP to use for stuff like Alexander, or playing 4 CP forwards. Yeah, you use Alexander to deal with your opponent's big threats, and then you basically turn your guys sideways, attack your opponent, and win the game from there. Alright, so let's get started on a card-by-card analysis. First of all, let's look at the forwards. First of all, we have 3 copies of Kan-E-Senna. It's a 5-cost forward at 7,000 power, but while you control Raya-O-Senna, Kan-E-Senna gets plus 2,000 power, and when you have Arun-Senna on the field, when you play Kan-E-Senna, reactivate all your backups. So it's effectively a 5 CP forward at 9,000 power that can reactivate all your backups when she enters play. Also, while you have Raya-O-Senna on the field, both Arun-Senna and Kan-E-Senna cannot be chosen by abilities as well. So it makes her a really difficult forward to deal with, not only because she has really big size, she also comes in for free, and the fact that your opponent can't use abilities to deal with her as well, which leaves your opponent to like sort of deal through combat or by playing like a summon. And because summons generally don't hit for 9,000 power, it means that your opponent's generally going to be using a very large summon to deal with her. Next, we have 3 copies of Bards. So it's a 5-cost forward at 9,000 power. EX burst when Bards enters the field, activate all Win characters you control. So for anyone who's played Win decks from Opus 1, this card has been a mainstay for Win decks simply because he's a strong forward, he comes in at virtually no cost, and he has a really good ability to reactivate all your Win characters, which not only reactivates your backups, but also reactivates your forwards as well. So you can use your forwards to attack, play Bards, reactivate your forwards, and have a lot of value from there. So this card's great. It's also a very relevant EX burst as well. Next, we have 3 copies of Moogle. So Moogle is a new card from this set. It's a 4 CP forward at 6,000 power, so it's a bit below the curve, but when Moogle does enter the field, you do draw a card, so you're kind of getting your 2 CP back straight away, so it's kind of a 2 CP 6,000 power forward, which is pretty good. And then when Moogle leaves the field or enters the break zone, you do draw a card. So when Moogle does die, you do get another card back. So effectively, this card is effectively a free card, in that you are getting your 4 CP back eventually over time. And yeah, it's great because it allows us to cycle through a lot of cards in our deck, helps us to get to the cards that we need, and it's a body as well. Next, we have 3 copies of Balthier. So it's a 4-cost forward at 8,000 power, and it's got 3 different abilities. So one, whenever one of your backups enter the field, reactivate Balthier, which means that if you do play him in the early mid game, we can attack with Balthier aggressively and then use backups to reactivate him for defense. We can also dull him to choose 1 forward and deal 2,000 damage, which allows our smaller forwards to trade up against our opponent's larger guys, and it also allows us to finish forwards off from stuff when we play with Barbarisha. Next, we also have an S ability, which is Fire's War. So for S, Wind, Balthier cannot be chosen by summon or abilities turn and gains first strike until the end of the turn. So it's a great card. It allows him to wall off as a defensive forward, and also gives it the ability to sort of dodge abilities and summons as well. And so that's going to be another common theme from this deck, being able to make your forwards unchoosable, which makes it very, very difficult for your opponent to sort of deal with your guys. Next, we have 3 copies of Barbarisha. It's a 4 CP forward, 7,000 power. When Barbarisha enters the field, choose 1 forward your opponent controls until the end of the turn. Its power becomes 1,000. So basically, this makes a forward irrelevant in terms of power, and you can combo this off with something like Balthier or Yashtol to basically finish off your opponents. Not only that, basically, if you do play it after combat, so if one of your opponent's forwards blocks one of your forwards, such as like a Ranger or a Moogle, you can then use Barbarisha to finish off that forward as well. So this card is a good sort of like good card both as a proactive play and also as a reactive play as well. Not only that, the fact that you do have these cards in your deck always makes your opponent question about blocking your attacker. So if you do attack with something like a Moogle and your opponent has like a 6,000 or a 9,000 power blocker, they have to question whether you have Barbarisha, because if you're attacking with the Moogle and your Moogle dies, you're not really losing a huge amount of value. You're getting your card back, and then you can use Barbarisha to finish them off. So your opponent always has to question whether or not to block you, and Barbarisha is just a great way to make your opponent hesitate when they block as well. Next, we have 2 copies of Hope. So it's one of the new cards from this set, 4 CP forward at 5,000 power, so it is below curve, but when an EX bursts When Hope enters the field, search your deck for an Alexander and add it to your hand. So effectively, it does kind of become a 2 CP forward at 5,000 power, which is on curve. It's also got ability of Dull, choose one forward, activate it. So this can be used in combination with something like Balthier, so you can like Dull Balthier, shoot a guy for 2,000, and Hope reactivate and shoot for another 2,000 as well. Not only that, it just allows you to attack with stuff like Bart and Kan-E-Senna, and then allow you to use Hope to reactivate and put him on defense as well. Not only that, he can also be used to sort of like combo with Trey. So Trey is unchoosable by abilities when active, and unchoosable by summons when he's dull. So you can use Hope to reactivate him in response to stuff to like sort of avoid certain abilities. So it's a great card. We are running 3 copies of 3 different Alexanders, 5 copies of Alexander. So we have the 5-cost Alexander, the 2-cost Alexander, and the 4-cost Alexander. So Hope basically is a toolbox that allows us to search for the relevant Alexander that we need at any given time. So it's a great card that combos into all of this. Next, we have 2 copies of Dorgan. It's a free CP forward at 6,000 power, so it's a little bit below curve. But for Dull, remove Dorgan from the game. Choose one forward, remove it from the game. So Dorgan is one of our sort of more unconditional removal abilities that Win has, and it's pretty good. It does prevent enter break zone abilities because it is removing them from the game. And yeah, so the only drawback for this card is that he does have to sit around for a turn. So you do play him, and he has to sit around an entire turn before he can use its ability. But as soon as you do have him down, your opponent has to always question about whether your Dorgan can remove one of their forwards and which forward they're going to remove at what time. It's also like a great defender as well, because you can block a forward and then use Dorgan to remove itself to remove another one of your opponent's forward, effectively removing one of your opponent's forwards and also blocking attack as well. So this card is like pretty good in the mid game, but it's also like great in the late game as well. Next, we have 2 copies of Trey. It's a 4 CP forward at 8,000 power. When it's active, he can't be chosen by opponent's abilities, and when it's dull, cannot be chosen by opponent's summit. So it's a very difficult card for your opponent to sort of deal with. The main value of this card is that it can't be chosen by opponent's ability when active. So it's a great card to use as a defensive wall if your opponent is giving you sort of more early game aggression. And this card has so many good like matchups against so many good different colors. So it's great against ice, it's great against lightning, and it is pretty good against fire as well. So the fact that he can't be chosen by opponent's abilities makes him like immune to stuff like Armor, it makes him immune to stuff like Genesis, Alcid, Snow, Swamp Monk, Red Mage. Like there's so many things that can't get over Trey when you just have him there as a defensive wall. So yeah, if you do play him into like mid early game, he's just going to sit there and give you the space to allow you to like play your backups down. Also when he's dull, he's unchoosable by summon, so if you do attack with him, your opponent can't use summons to sort of like finish him or remove him. So yeah, so it's a great card to play around with. It's also combos well with Diabolos. So Diabolos is a summon that reactivates through your backups if you have a Class 0 Cadet, which Trey is. So yeah, it just sort of like fulfills very well into this deck, and also plays into the sort of strategy of making your guys unchoosable. And next we have 2 copies of Ranger. So it's very much a similar but downsized version of Trey. It's a free cost 7,000 power, so it's on curve. Ranger cannot be chosen by opponent's abilities. And again, so this is just like a good way to deal with your opponent's early game aggression. If your opponent is applying pressure to you early, they're either playing one big forward of like 8,000 power that's 4 CP, and you just kind of let that through, or if your opponent's playing a whole lot of sort of smaller guys that have like dull abilities and that sort of thing, Ranger's a good like wall for those guys as well. 7,000 power is pretty good, and also it can't be chosen by opponent's ability, so it has a lot of defensive power as well in that same vein that Trey does. Next, we have 2 copies of Y'shtola. It is a 2 CP forward at 3,000 power. It's got the ability of Wind, choose one forward, deal 1,000 damage, and Double, choose one forward, deal 2,000 damage. So this card is just going to be like a card that's just kind of constantly pinging your opponent for damage, and it's a great card for doing that. With this deck, when we do get to sort of late game, we'll have a lot of CP and a lot of backup available to us. So playing Y'shtola down and using its ability to just ping your opponent's forwards is great. It can be used to just constantly get rid of your opponent's forwards, or allows your sort of mid-range forwards to trade up against your opponent's bigger guys. So this card is like really strong, especially in this deck where you have a whole lot of resource built up. Y'shtola is just a really strong powerhouse towards the late game. Next, let's talk about the backups. So this deck runs 17 backups, and it runs a very small pool of backups because it's very focused on getting to its 5 backup line very quickly. And so yeah, first card we'll talk about is Untitled. We got 3 copies of her. It's a 4 cost backup. When Untitled enters field, search your deck for a card named Kan-E-Senna or Ryo-Senna and add it to your hand. So this card is the card that we'll be mulliganing for most games, simply because we want to be able to get both the Sennas down, which allows us to use Kan-E-Senna very easily. And like this card will search for Ryo-Senna, so on our first turn we can get our 2 backups down, and it is effectively a 2 CP backup when you consider it searches as well. So it's pretty good for what it does. The annoying thing is that it's not a free cost backup and it's not an EX burst. So typically for backups that do search for very specific cards, you either are expecting EX burst or free cost to them. So it is a little bit overcosted. if you compare against like what it should be. But considering how it's such a strong card, like it builds into such a strong strategy, I think it'd actually be a little bit too strong if it was EX Pro. So I think it's a very fair card right now, and it just builds into a very tight, good strategy. Next, we have 3 copies of Kan-E-Senna. So so it's a 2 CP backup. Cards named Kan-E-Senna and Kan-E-Senna you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Additionally, when it's on the field, your Kan-E-Senna gets plus 2,000 power as well. So basically, it's a cheap backup that allows us to activate Kan-E-Senna's like additional plus 2 power, so it makes it larger, and also makes it unchoosable by ability. So it's just like a great combination of effects to make a big forward and also make it unchoosable, so it makes it very difficult for your opponent to deal with. Most of the time, we'll be searching it out with Kan-E-Senna, but if we do have it early and we play Kan-E-Senna later, we can always use Kan-E-Senna to search for Kan-E-Senna. So there is no loss there. This card like builds into a core part of our strategy. We need backups, and it does support our main forward, so yeah, it's a great card there. Next, we have 3 copies of Maria. It's a 4 CP backup. When forwards you control get plus 1,000 power. It's a very simple strategy. It basically allows your guys to trade up against 1 bracket higher. So your smaller guys will trade up against your opponent's mid guys. Your mid guys can trade up against your opponent's large guys, and your large guys could just like be bigger than their guys as well. So it's a great card. Making your rangers from 7,000 to 8,000 is really good. Making your trades from like 8,000 to 9,000 is fantastic. So yeah, it's a great card to play, and yeah, it's an even backup as well. So it doesn't like we're not forced to use backups to play this card. Next, we have 3 copies of Aerith. This Aerith sort of like really builds into our strategy. It's a 3-cost backup. When Aerith enters the field, choose up to 3 backups you control other than Aerith, activate them. So this basically rewards us for playing backups. And if we do get up to 3 backups, then we can play Aerith for effectively free. And yeah, this is one deck that does build its backups really easily. So Aerith comes down as your 4th backup for free, really cheaply. And also additional copies of Aerith also have to also allow you to activate the Planet Protector ability, which is S dull. Activate all forwards you control. They cannot be chosen by summons or abilities this turn. So it just gives you another layer of protection on your forwards. And basically this card comes in for free. Additional copies are great. So this card just builds great into this like deck's overall strategy. Next, we have 3 copies of Evoker. So this is just a vanilla 1 CP backup that costs like 1 CP and doesn't really sort of do anything. The bonus to this card is that you can play it for just 1 backup. So it's like a really, really cheap backup. And yeah, so we're running 3 copies of this because we want to get to one like early. We want to get to one around the 2nd or 3rd turn to ramp up to that 3rd backup really easily. And because that time will generally be a little bit lower on cards, allowing you to play it for 0 CP or like 1 CP is really, really good. So yeah, this card is just builds into overall strategy. When I went to World Championships a couple of weeks ago in Japan, a lot of the Japanese players were running Evokers, and we got to see that Evokers bring a lot of value to the table in terms of they allow you to get from your two backups to like 3 or 4 backups very, very quickly, and Evokers just sort of really good for doing that. So yeah, so Evoker generally will only have 1 on the field at a time because we want to have other backups in the field. But yeah, it's just like a cheap backup that you can put into play. And to finish off our backup line, we're running 2 copies of White Mage. So it's a 2 CP backup for 1 dull, put White Mage in a break zone, choose 1 forward, activate it against plus 1,000 power until the end of the turn. So basically, this is like a sort of smaller version of Sylph. It allows you to reactivate a forward, gives it plus 1,000 power. So this is great on defense in terms of you can attack with a Bard or a Kan-E-Senna, and then you can use White Mage to reactivate them on defense, or just giving a guy plus 1,000 power is usually like a good enough like combat trick to be like relevant to help you get over certain forwards as well. So that's great. The reason why we're running 2 copies of this is because sometimes you're going to want like additional backups early game. So we want to get those backups early in the game, but we want a backup that can break itself because we do want to get to a stage where we want to have the 2 centers, we want to have Aerith and we want to have Maria on the field. So White Mage allows us to play a backup in the early game, and if we want to clear the backup space later to get that Maria down or to get that Aerith down, then White Mage will allow us to do that. So yeah, that's the sort of value that these sort of like 2-cost backups that break themselves bring, is that they're a backup early game, you break them later on to create space for your other backups that you really want to have in your sort of core backup line. And next, we talk about the summons. So first of all, we're running 3 copies of Diabolos. It is a 3-cost summon EX burst. Choose 1 forward, deal it 1,000 damage for each character you control. If you control a job class 0 cadet forward, select up to 3 backups you control, activate them. So first thing to note that this does say 1,000 damage for each character you control, so that does include your backups as well. So this deck, because it focuses on getting to 5 backups, Diabolos is almost always going to be hitting for minimum 5k damage. But when you consider that this deck also allows you to play like 3 backups when you're at 5 CP, then like you get to 5 backups, you'll generally be going Bart's Kan-E-Senna straight away, and then you have like backups to play like a Trey or a Balthier. So in a situation where you do get up to 5 backups, most of the times Diabolos will be hitting for at least 7,000 or 8,000 damage. Yeah, and it's great. It's great when you do that. So this card I originally had at 2, and I was experimenting around with it, and this card just happened to be such a powerhouse towards the mid late game that, like, yeah, free copies is like absolutely like really good in this deck. It also is just like unconditional removal. So if your opponent is playing forwards that can't be hit with Alexanders, such as Vayne or such as Emperor, then Diabolos does give you like a more reliable out to it, so that's pretty good as well there. It is EX burst, so yeah, so you can get it in like the earlier mid game, and it does like, it will be able to like take out one of your opponent's smaller or mid-sized forwards. Also, we do have Trey as well, so if you do happen to have Trey, when you play Diabolos, you do get to reactivate free backups, so it is kind of like another bonus for playing this card as well. So this card just builds into so much of the synergy that we have that it's like a really good fit, and yeah, it's a very solid summon. Next, we have 2 copies of Alexander, the 5-cost one from Opus 4. So it's EX Burst, choose one forward of 9,000 power or more, break it. So the reason why we're playing this card is because we have a lot of forwards at around that 9,000, 8,000 power mark. And the thing is, when we do get Kan-E-Senna out or we do get Bartz out, we want to be able to attack with them. We want to be able to get for our opponent's defenses. And if our opponent plays a 9,000 power forward, then Alexander is a great card to deal with it. Because Kan-E-Senna can't be like chosen by opponent's abilities, your opponent either has to commit a lot of resources for a summon to get rid of her, or play a bigger forward. And if your opponent plays a bigger forward, you just use Alexander, blow it up, and then you send your guys through. So Alexander is just like a great solution to it. And because we're running so many different Alexanders, Hope can search for the relevant Alexander for us at any given time. Next is the 2-cost Alexander. It's EX Burst. Select one of the 2 following actions. Choose one monster, break it, or choose one backup you control, activate it, draw a card. So this basically allows us to hedge into any sort of metagame where we have a lot of monsters. So if there's like a metagame that's like playing like a lot of ice monsters or water monsters, then Alexander is a great solution to that. So yeah, because monsters are generally quite difficult to deal with, especially if your opponent is playing something like the 2-cost Ghoul, which doesn't really affect our deck all too much, or if your opponent's playing stuff like Behemoths or Tomberries or Malboros. They're really difficult to interact with because they stay as monsters until your opponent wants to make them forwards and so on. So Alexander is a great way for us to just pop them when they're not forwards. And also in matchups where your opponent isn't playing monsters, it's not a dead card. You can always use it to cycle through your deck and reactivate a backup. So it's a 2 CP summon, but then because you can reactivate a backup with it, it effectively becomes a 1 CP cycle in matchups where it isn't relevant. Also, it is EX Burst though, so in the situation where your opponent does have monsters, stuff like Adamant Tortoises and that sort of thing, if you do EX Bursts, you can break their monsters. They don't get the ability to like respond, so they can't use Adamant Tortoise to like just draw a card. So it's great there. And also, yeah, if your opponent does have monsters, it's just like a draw you an extra card, which is like pretty good as well. So we're running 2 copies of this Alexander. Depending on your local metagame, how many monsters you might see, you might bump this up to 3. And finally, we have 1 copy of the 4-cost Alexander. It is an EX Burst. Choose one forward of cost 5 or more, break it. So this is also kind of like matchup dependent as well. Some matchups will see more 5s. Yeah, so this card is, we're running 1 copy of this and 2 copies of the other 5-cost Alexander, simply because it's more important for us to deal with forwards that are 9,000 power as opposed to forwards that cost 5 or more. Because forwards that cost 5 or more can either be forwards that are either large, or they could be forwards that get additional value. So stuff like Steiner, stuff like Setzer, these are 5-cost forwards, but they're not exactly big forwards. And Alexander does hit a certain other set of cards that the 5-cost Alexander doesn't hit. So yeah, so this Alexander is useful at times, but it doesn't hit the targets that are really important for us to hit, which are the 9k forwards, because those are the ones that are really stopping us from being able to hit our opponent. But it does give us an extra option for Hope to search for. So in a situation where you do need to just like remove one of your opponent's blockers or deal with your opponent's like 5 CP forwards, and this Alexander is a great way to do that. And so yeah, that's the deck. In terms of recommendations, I would recommend this to someone that enjoys playing more of a setup/combo deck. So if you're someone that does prefer more of a resource style, you do want to get your backups down, and you do want to sort of like set up a sort of mid-game resource space where you can like play forwards, this is a great deck for you. This sort of plays like very much into like your style. It's great because you don't have to discard too many cards. After you do get your backups down, you're getting a whole lot of resources, and you do accumulate resources quite quickly towards the mid-late game, simply because you're not spending a whole lot of cards from your hand in order to play forwards, and you're playing a lot of forwards, and your opponent's spending a lot more resources to deal with your guys. Not to mention, a whole lot of your guys are hard to target, so a lot of you guys are unchoosable by opponent's abilities, some of them are unchoosable by summons, and you have Aerith as well. So it's really difficult for your opponent to try to like mess around with your forwards with a whole lot of abilities, especially with all the sort of popular elements like fire, ice, and earth, lightning. These are all really like popular elements, and they all have very strong abilities, and you just having a whole bunch of guys that can't be chosen by opponent abilities basically shuts off a whole lot of their pros off their deck off. So yeah, it's great into the metagame right now, and it does give you a whole lot of ways to deal with monsters as well. So this deck's actually quite balanced, and it has a very good matchup in the metagame, I feel. And yeah, if you just like want to play mono win, then definitely I would recommend this as a build to first get yourself started off with. In terms of overall stats, I would rate the power of this deck about a 7 out of 10. It doesn't have like the same power as like a lightning or a fire deck would have, but because the deck is a lot more defensive, so it doesn't have such an imposing amount of power. It doesn't have a whole lot of like significant removal, but the deck is able to create a lot of value. So basically, you're getting good value for the power that you're getting, and you have a whole lot of defensive abilities in terms of like not being able to be chosen by opponent's ability. So it's not as strong as other decks, but it's just very difficult to deal with. In terms of speed, it is a mid to late game deck, so this deck does require some time to set up, but once it does set up, it is quite good. It's not a fully late game deck because it doesn't have like the sort of like full control suite that like other like more late game control decks might have, like such as like Heroic Lulu decks, but this is a deck that once it does hit that mid game, it does like speed up pretty quickly from there. In terms of consistency, it's about an 8 out of 10. There's a lot of search and a lot of cycle in this deck. Between your Moogles, between your Sennas, between your Hopes, there's a lot of ways to get to the cards that you need. So this deck is able to get you a lot of the pieces that you need for your deck. It definitely doesn't have the same sort of consistency as like a water deck with its like 8 or 9 different searches. But yeah, it's pretty consistent. It's pretty good for what it does. And yeah, so an 8 out of 10 is like very above satisfactory. In terms of difficulty, I would rate about a 6.5 out of 10. It's not too difficult to learn to play the deck. The only difficult part about playing the deck is getting the balance between defense and setup in the early game right. So yeah, so in the early game, depending on how much aggression your opponent's putting down, you have to determine what's the best way to respond to that in terms of how much damage you can take and how much setup you need. And sort of being able to balance that out is really sort of the difficult part of this deck, and that's really sort of what you have to learn. But after you do sort of get over that hurdle, the deck becomes very easy to play. After you do get to 5 backups, you just play guys and then you attack through with them. So yeah, so there are some nuances to learning how to play the deck, but it's a very rewarding deck once you do. So if you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to tweet them to me at GrandJason or leave them in the comment section below. I'll post up a video response. So I'll be doing a part 2 video for this deck next week. So I'll be sort of like aiming in future to get a cycle of get a deck video out, and then the following week get the sort of like follow up like part 2 deck video up. And yeah, so that's my plans. If you do have any comments or Twitters, if you post it to me on a social forum like on YouTube or on Twitter, it means I can sort of share the response, and so everyone who might have the question can also see it as well. And yeah, I'll put them in a video response. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to post any sort of feedback or thoughts or comments in the comment section below. I do read through these and I try to respond back to most of them. And yeah, if you enjoy my content, feel free to thumbs up, like the video, and subscribe. It helps out with all the YouTube analytics and algorithm, that sort of stuff. So it allows me to create more content for you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks a lot for watching. GrandJ out.